98.5 in Tamale on 99.7. Asaase Radio.
Good evening and welcome to Asaase Business PM with me, Kevin Annan, and I'm doing this with my co-host,
Rosemary Balami.
Tonight on the SDG Hub, we will discuss the topic climate crisis and mental health, understanding the link. And to discuss this, we have with us Sylvia Hagan. She's a psychologist and a climate mental health researcher. We also have with us Seyram, Necku, who is also a psychologist and a mental health advocate. Business PM is brought to you in partnership with the Center for Sustainable Transformation, CeST. Good evening once again. You're welcome to our weekly SDG Hub run by the Center for Sustainable Transformation here on Asaase Radio. I'm your host, Kevin Annan, and as usual, I'm here with my co-host,
Rosemary Balami,
who is from the Young Reporters for the Environment, YRE Ghana, a program under CeST. The climate crisis isn't just about melting ice caps and rising sea levels. It's also about the profound impact it has on our mental well-being. As temperatures soar and natural disasters become more frequent, individuals and communities around the world are grappling with the hidden consequence, the toll on mental health. Today we embark on a journey to understand the link between these two critical aspects of our lives, climate crisis and mental health, from the disproportionate impact on marginalized communities to the coping strategies that empower individuals to navigate through uncertainty. We'll uncover the stories and insights that illuminates the path forward.
Rightly said, Kevin. In the face of these challenges, it's essential to explore how individuals and communities can find balance amidst environmental concerns. How do we navigate the psychological dimensions of climate change while maintaining mental wellness? What coping strategies can we employ to mitigate eco-anxiety and build resilience in the face of uncertainty? Today, we are joined by two distinguished guests who bring unique perspectives to this conversation. Together, they will guide us through the complexities of this topic, offering insights and strategies for maintaining mental wellness in the era of this, climate crisis.
Absolutely. And just like you said, we are joined in the studio by two awesome guests here. We have Sylvia Hagan, a psychologist and a climate mental health researcher, and Seyram Necku, psychologist and a mental health advocate. You're welcome, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's great to have you here, Sylvia and Carl. First of all, we'd like you to do a brief introduction of yourselves and what you do. So I'll start with you, Sylvia.
Okay. So I'm a psychologist by profession and a climate mental health researcher. My work mainly revolves around understanding the lived experiences of individuals living in the coastal areas, of which these individuals are really affected by the impacts of climate change. And I also look into their emotional, psychological, and social impacts of how the climate change has really affected them. So mainly my work is focused on communities in the coastal areas.
Okay. All right, Carl.
Yes, as you said, my name is Seyram Necku, and a psychologist as well, and a mental health advocate. And my main interest is in psychoeducation, advocacy, and as well as research in mental health research. Yeah. Wow. So.
All right, so we have two guests who are able to connect the dots for us. For those of us who do not understand the link between climate change and mental health.
That's right.
Excellent. So for starters, I'll start with you, Carl. Mental health has really gained popularity across the globe recently. So we'd like you to break down what mental health is all about before we delve into the other issues.
Sure. So we can't talk about mental health without basically talking about health, what health is generally, okay? And according to the World Health Organization, health is a complete state of physical, mental, and social well-being, and not merely the absence of disease or infirmity. So it goes to say that the fact that someone doesn't look physically ill, the fact that someone does not look physically ill does not mean that the person is healthy Okay, there might be stuff going on that might not be physical, but that might not be shown, but manifest physically. But the person might be going through a lot of things, like by way of depression, anxiety, and other mental health conditions. And as you should also understand that. So after explaining what health is, I'm now going to explain what mental health is. And mental health is when one has the ability to cope with life stresses that come, that meet them, okay? And to be able to work productively and contribute to their community. So it goes to say that you can't avoid stress. There's always good stress and bad stress. Good stress being eustress, bad stress being distress. So now we are going down to what mental disorders are, okay, so that it makes the conversation much clearer. So I started from what health is, I've gone down to what mental health is. Now we are going to mental disorders, and these are conditions that affect the way one thinks, their emotions and their behaviors as well, okay, and it causes the distress in the person as well as an impairment in their social functioning, okay. So there are a lot of mental health disorders. The problem is a lot of people say that mental health is just a condition. No, there are about 20 mental health disorders, and climate change has an effect on a number of them. That's why I need to clarify on mental health, mental health disorders. And we have neurodevelopmental disorders, we have depression, we have anxiety, we have personality disorders, we have adjustment disorders, we have sexual disorders. All these are disorders that we handle as psychologists. Currently, there are 3.1 million people who have mental health disorders
in the world.
In Ghana. 10% making.
Oh, really?
Yeah, that's about 2%. Yes, so that's 2 years ago. Yes, and so about 650,000 people are having a major depression in Ghana, and 41% have psychological distress. And there's a treatment gap of, first was 98, now it's 85%. So only about 15% get treatment from mental health disorders.
Interesting. What a way to break it down for us to understand. Thank you very much, Carl. We move on to you, Sylvia. I'd like you to explain to us the link between mental health and climate change. What effects does the climate have on our mental health and all of that?
Okay, so I'll start with talking about how we are interdependent on nature. So as humans, because we live in the environment, it has impacts on us. It has impacts on our behaviors and our attitudes. So because the environment is being affected, it actually affects us as well. So the one impact of climate is the extreme heat exposure that actually causes both physical and psychological distress. And so when we experience this extreme heat exposure, it actually causes some psychological distress. Let's look at it from the agricultural sector with how climate change is affecting the farmers in terms of low yields. So when these farmers have these low yields, it actually causes them to have some psychological challenges, like having to have some suicidal ideations. Some even have suicidal thoughts. Some even commit the suicide itself.
Yeah, because their source of livelihood has been affected by climate change.
Yes, their source of livelihood is being affected by climate change. When you look at people who live in the coastal areas, of which one of my projects is centered on, these individuals leave their houses, their homes, and you realize that their source of livelihood is just gone. And it really affects their stress levels. So the link between climate change and mental health is that climate change actually increases the mental health challenges that we have because it affects our livelihoods, it affects what we do, and so with that, it causes us to have this psychological distress.
Okay, that makes it clearer for me, because I also had my qualms about the understanding of the link between climate change and mental health. So what I'm understanding is that there are existing mental health conditions, and then climate change is a stressor. Once it affects your economic, your livelihood and so on and so forth. Excellent. For you, Sylvia, is there any research or anything as a researcher? Are there any figures or numbers that you could support us to explain the relationship between climate change and mental health?
Okay, so mainly from the global perspective, from the World Health Organization reports and Policy Brief Reports 2021, actually it talks about the link between climate change and mental health. Other organizations like the American Psychological Association, the Global Psychological Alliance, talk about how climate change is related to mental health. But the conversation is still new and we are still investigating it even from the global perspective. But within our context, we can still see evidence of it because people tell us about their lived experiences of how the climate change is really affecting their mental health.
Yeah.
On the projects that I'm working on with the communities and even among students, university students, they tell you about how these climate-related events, like the sea level rise, the extreme heat, is actually affecting them. So preliminary analysis from my projects, particularly at the community I'm working with, they actually tell you that this is really happening. So it's not like it's a global thing, but with us, it is also happening, and they are calling out and crying out to us to actually help them amplify their voices. That this is really something that we should pay attention to, and that there's a lot to be said and done when it comes to climate change and mental health. So it's a conversation that is really broad, and as it stands now, the statistics is not so clear.
So it's still in the early stages for us.
Yes,
to get
in
clear
Ghana,
numbers on things.
in Ghana, it's still in the early stages. So there's still that awareness, and that's awareness that we have to know more about it.
In order to find solutions.
Yes.
Understood. The heat is unbearable these days. No wonder I feel stressed a lot.
Charlie, it's like you're being cooked. Not the Nigeria cooking, you're cooking them now. But not that type, but Charlie, it's like you're being cooked in the room, man.
Anyway, let me come to you, Carl. So as a psychologist and, climate mental health advocate, what motivated you to focus on, this intersection of mental health and climate crisis?
So as mentioned earlier, I gave a plethora of psychological mental disorders and how it affects an individual. And Sylvia has highlighted on how this link affects an individual. So my interest, in fact, sometimes you're watching news and there's serious floods, or there are floods in India, then you realize that the wildfires in the US, the contradiction. Then there's hurricane somewhere, then it's real, it's happening. And there's a saying that if you notice your neighbor's beard is on fire, then you better get water by yours, you understand? So I just felt the urge and the need to push and try to see how best we can help mitigate some of these mental health challenges that come with climate change. Secondly, to limited advocacy. Nothing is being said
about
it. Yes. And lastly, there's limited research, like Sylvia has said, on the effect of climate change. Outside there, yes, they are doing so much research. When you listen to BBC, every other day they are talking about climate change, how the ice sheets are melting and all that.
Why is there limited research when it comes to Ghana's case? Is it that you don't get the concept yet?
Well, I think Sylvia can answer that. I think it has to do with awareness. People still think it seems far away, Funny enough, most of those causing this problem is the West with their fossil fuel and but we are bearing much of the brunt of it. So.
And what are some of these common psychological responses to these climate-related stresses?
Okay, so you're looking at post-traumatic stress disorders. I mean, having experienced hurricane or floods, or let's come to a context, Ghana, the tidal wave that occurred, Keta, yes. I mean, imagine just waking up and suddenly you've lost your livelihood, you've lost everything, and they tell you that there's another tidal wave coming up. I mean, you'll be reliving that past experience, that traumatic experience of losing everything you had. Okay, so post-traumatic stress disorders, where you relive that painful experience of losing everything that was dear to you. I mean, imagine losing your house, you just wake up and it's all gone.
So then, you can just move on.
Yeah, so then there's suicidal ideation, like Sylvia also said. I mean, you go for a loan as a farmer, you're hoping that the rain's coming. A lot of us rely on the rains. Farmers, 60% of us are into agriculture, and we contribute 30% to the GDP of Ghana. So about 45% rely on rains. And imagine erratic rain, erratic weather. When it rains. When it's sunny or it's dry, it's dry. So there's desertification and all that. Yeah. So then there's anxiety. She spoke about eco-anxiety or climate anxiety, climate trauma. Yes, you're anxious. your house has been flooded. It starts to rain, and you're thinking, hey, you start packing. You don't know, should I move upstairs?
Yeah.
Like, you understand? Because you don't know. Yeah, I'm sure. Can I speak?
Oh, yeah.
I can mix it in.
It's Asaase Radio.
It's Asaase Radio. Thank you.
No, we prefer English.
You prefer English?
You can chip in the tree here and there.
Here and there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So yes, there's always anxiety. You don't know what is going to happen next. Yeah. So that's that, and stress, amongst other mental health disorders I mentioned. Yeah, these are a few that.
So you made mention of anxiety. So what role does this eco-anxiety play in shaping individuals' perceptions and behaviors, towards this climate crisis, Sylvia?
Okay, so I'll talk in light of two. I'll talk about it in two ways.
Yeah.
Because of a research I conducted among university students in Accra.
Okay.
So with this, I measured their climate anxiety by asking them questions about how they feel, how anxious they are about the climate crisis.
Yeah.
And I also asked them questions about pro-environmental behavior, if they are willing to actually engage in some sustainable practices. And the preliminary analysis showed that the climate anxiety is actually related to pro-environmental behavior, meaning that as they are anxious about all that is happening, but in that same anxiety, they are thinking about doing something.
Okay.
So I asked myself, so is climate anxiety a blessing or is a curse? That's actually the title of the paper.
Wow.
And so, like, it's in two ways. The anxiety is good at a point. Just if it's in the lower level, it's cool because it will make people come to realize that we have to act, and so we can engage in pro-environmental behaviors to actually help solve this problem. At the other side, if it becomes so extreme, it will lead to suicidal ideations. It will lead to people actually killing themselves because they think all hope is lost and they don't have any source of livelihood. So it's better to die than to live. So we can look at it from two different perspectives. That a little of it is good because it will help you to actually engage in some actions and actually help to maintain the environment. At the other side, it can also lead to suicidal ideations and actually not even make you to do anything, like learn helplessness, like you just can't do anything. So in relation to that, it'll have a good side and a bad side
as well.
Yeah.
But are there any examples of successful interventions or programs aimed at addressing this problem?
Okay, so I'll talk about it in light of having to plant trees along the coast.
Okay.
So that we are trying to do nature-based solutions. So I call it fighting nature with nature because nature understands itself actually. So if nature is doing this to us, we should also address it by using nature. And when we do the planting of the trees along the coast and also in the towns, we are solving two problems at the same time. One, we are actually reducing the floods because the trees will help with the floods. At the same time, the trees have some therapeutical value for the people in there that helps to reduce their stress level and helps actually help them in terms of their stress level. Because I'm also conducting a research on how these green spaces affect people's stress levels and mental health. And the preliminary findings also reveals that when people visit these green spaces, it actually helps reduces their stress. They tell you how they are able to sleep well after visiting these places.
Wow.
So we have ecotherapy that could also help those who are already facing these mental health challenges. So this is one of the programs or interventions that I think will be very good. So when we are doing the urban planning, we should actually inculcate green spaces and actually do the nature-based solutions with, do it along the coast to actually help.
So ecotherapy is actually a thing now.
It's still in the pipeline. Outside the country, yes.
Okay.
But to the best of my knowledge in Ghana, it's still something new that we are trying to actually inculcate.
All right. To you, Carl. So there's anxiety about climate change already. People are already feeling these stresses with the effects of climate change. Now, how do you communicate with them about the crisis that is there to tell them that, look, this situation doesn't look good. It looks bleak with the way the climate is going. How do you explain to them without them feeling anxious or more despondent?
Okay, so before we prefer an intervention, there should be rigorous knowledge-based research. You should have information to prefer an intervention. Yeah. So it's important we conduct a lot of research to know what the issues are before we go in to prefer an intervention to help solve the issues at hand. Yeah. So by that we conduct psychoeducation campaigns where we engage everyone, all stakeholders, to try to bring their attention and awareness to how there's a link between climate change and mental health. Yeah, so it's important that we first of all research, through that get clear-cut interventions, retrofit interventions. Then we are able to come up. And again, a language barrier, it's a big deal. So we have to always try to come down to their level so that we're able to communicate some of this.
All right, so research, education, and awareness.
Thank you. Yeah.
To you, Sylvia. Now, for a researcher, are there any specific populations or demographics that will feel the effects of climate change more than others, from your own estimation?
Okay, so let's look at the population.
Yeah.
So with the population, individuals in low and middle income countries, sub-Saharan Africa, are seen to be most vulnerable to these impacts because we have limited resources to do with this impact.
Okay.
So in terms of population, we can talk about that. In terms of demographics, we can talk about people who are having mental health disorders. Yeah. So they have it already, and then they are also vulnerable to the effects of the effects of the mental climate change and mental health. So we talk about people living with chronic diseases. We can also talk about older persons. Yeah. We can also talk about children. Yeah, so mainly these demographics.
How about the people living on the coastline?
Yeah, so they fall under the specific population.
Okay. All right.
So now let me come to you, Carl, again. Ghana is a culturally, of course, sensitive country. Are there any, cultural differences in how different communities perceive and respond to this, mental health challenges posed by the climate crisis?
It will be unfair to just say that it is the case that this culture, no. Okay. But we have to really look into this. This is something we actually started to look at, and when we come up with the results, we'll be able to share with all of us. But it will be unfair to really pinpoint. Yes, yeah.
Indeed. So Sylvia, from your perspective, how can policymakers integrate mental health considerations into climate change mitigation adaptation strategies?
Okay, so as I mentioned earlier with the green urban and green space and urban planning, so policymakers can actually look at this and actually kind of come out with some policy that will help with urban planning of putting these green
spaces
together.
Yes. Okay. So that's one thing. Another thing is still with the ecotherapy.
Okay.
We can also do that. Another thing is also to provide mental health support for those living in the coastal areas. Yes, because some of them have low socioeconomic status. So if you provide them with these psychological services, it will really go a long way to help them. So I think that was...
Still on you, Sylvia. What role do you see mental health professionals playing in addressing the psychological impacts of climate change?
Okay, we can talk about psychoeducation.
Yeah.
So, as Carl said, we have to do a lot of research and come out with some findings that can help us educate the public about the link between climate change and mental health. And mental health professionals are experts in this area, that they can give us evidence-based research on how to actually
deal with it.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and for both of you, for your last words, I'd like you to share a message. What message of hope or resilience would you like to share with our listeners who may be grappling with eco-anxiety or other climate-related concerns with their mental health? Yeah. Let's go with Carl first.
Okay, so I believe that if you feel that the eco-anxiety, it's good. Like Sylvia said, it helps you to be serve as an advocate for climate change. But sometimes it gets to the extreme. If you feel you need to talk to someone, there are therapeutic services. I mean, psychological services where you can come and we can take care of your needs. Apart from that, let's all be mindful that it's not far off. I mean, it's very close. So let's start taking action now. And let's.
Sylvia.
Yeah, I also say we should seek support if we are having some anxiety in relation to climate change, and that's going to help.
Indeed, we should seek support. So that's all that time will allow us. Thank you, Carl and Sylvia, for sharing your insights and expertise. This evening, it's clear that the link between the climate crisis and mental health is complex and a pressing issue that requires our attention. It's important that we continue to have these conversations and work towards solutions that promote both environmental and psychological resilience. Wow, so please tune in same time next week as we continue discussions on all things sustainable development right here on Asaase Radio 99.5 so that people and the planet can prosper. If you have any topic you want us to discuss, please share with us and shoot an email to sdghub@cestint.org. Remember, dear listeners, the future is in our hands and it's our responsibility to ensure a healthier planet for generations to come. Keep raising your voices, keep advocating for change, and keep tuning into the SDG Hub for more insightful conversations. Until next time, remember to take care of yourselves and each other.
And that's a wrap on the SDG Hub. Thank you for staying with us here on Asaase Radio. We've been speaking to Sylvia Hagan, psychologist and climate mental health researcher, and Carl Seyram, Necku, psychologist and mental health advocate. I've been your host, Kevin Annan, and I did this with my co-host,
Rosemary Balami.
We go back to Caleb.